How's it going, lazy bruisers? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Sekimeiya. It's time for us to kick off into Chapter 3. Very exciting stuff. I assume that means we're going to be running through the entire series of events again, but it's going to play out slightly differently and possibly from a different person's perspective, but we shall see. Let's find out, shall we? We've been in the front of the queue for a long time, looking at the dull wooden floor that would soon open. I looked behind me and noticed that a lot of people were waiting. The entrance kept opening, setting icy breezes towards my neck. I'd never seen the interior of Ashiya Tower before, and I never believed I'd ever enter it. The lobby felt empty despite all the people that had come due to the vast and dreary amount of space. I think it'll be time soon. Yeah, probably. Less than 20 minutes. Let me guess, we're Mia now. I had my mind blank all day, with no capacity to hold a conversation. Atsuki knew that, and kept restlessly glancing around. I hated the way I'd become, and silently apologized for putting him through even more pain. It was early in the morning, and we hadn't slept. Almost exhausted, I let my head drop and thoughtlessly stared at the floor. During the previous week, I could hardly even claim to have been alive. The death of our friend had shaken me in a way I'd never experienced. After lonesome months going over the most important decisions of my life, I thought that Atsuki's call had been the breath of fresh air. Well, what was the point in going to study abroad if it wasn't what I wanted the most? When I'd been at Atsuki's house, I felt embarrassed for not having realised before how straightforward the decision had always been. But reality had hit me way harder just the next day. I finally decided on something, and it had been rejected. Why had Mia died? It wasn't fair. The three of us were so happy that day. Why had it been Mia's last, so we Shidoya again? Of course, anyone could die at any point. I'd heard those words many times, but I never really understood them. What if I died instead? What if Atsuki had? Why was I so selfishly sad at that my future wouldn't be as I believed during that day? At the very least, she'd been unconscious. My thoughts were a mess, and she doesn't care about you, just remember that. My thoughts were a mess, so I put what little willpower I had into keeping them blank. Otherwise, I'd keep replaying the span of time in which I'd awakened next to Atsuki and heard everything. It wasn't easy to accept that the previous 2 weeks had actually happened, but I already considered them the two worst of my life. I'd known Atsuki for many years, and the person next to me was just a cast-off shell of his. I've never seen him look so depressed. However, despite the impact everything had on me, I'd also been able to think positively. That was why we were in Ashiya Tower. We couldn't let Mia's death take us down. The three of us had spoken about missing the old days, and about how hard the summer months had been. Even though it was just the two of us, Atsuki and I had wanted to come to Ashiya's event. We wanted to overcome everything together. But that wasn't fair. She didn't deserve that either. The mere thought of imagining a cheerful future without Mia was heartbreaking. She typically hadn't shown much emotion, but I knew she'd had a good heart. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I hated that after her death I regretted not having spoken to her enough. I hated how little I'd known about her, despite how often the three of us had been together. It could have been fair that I regretted that only because she died, and that, despite how broken I felt, the sadness her parents must have been experiencing didn't mean as much to me, because I never talked to them. I knew how shallow and unreasonable some of my thoughts were, but that wasn't enough to put an end to them. Was I just selfish? I kept wondering if that was all. You three are the first group, correct? A woman had been talking about what we would do, and she was addressing us. Yes. After a long wait, Atsuki answered with a plain and quiet voice. Alright then, please follow me to the event room, to be the first to see the Sekimeiya. Is Akado with us? Right. That day, Ashiya was showcasing a new discovery. I couldn't feel the intrigue I'd once faintly had, so after the two people at my side went through the door, I followed behind them with slow steps. On the opposite sides was a long corridor, vast and completely lacking in comfort. I didn't see where the others had gone, but a few of the doors were open. Are you feeling better? Oh yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about it. I walked toward one of the doors, but it didn't seem like anyone was behind it. Do you regret coming? I turned around, saddened to hear that question. No, of course not. I'm seriously glad we're here, I mean it. I didn't regret having come at all. The part of me that could feel it was really glad Atsuki was still at my side. I know how you feel, okay? It's the same for me. It doesn't help a lot to say it, but I don't want to see you sad. I'm here because I want to be, Atsuki. I'm okay. This is where I need to be right now. Sorry, I must look terrible. You know this isn't something you need to apologize for. Nothing about this is your fault. I'm not so sure. I wish it didn't have to be a drag for you now. Hey, come on. If you want to leave, we still can. Don't feel like you have to push yourself for my sake. It's alright. Thank you. Let's continue though. I was the one who wanted to come. Okay. The woman called us from one of the rooms, and we shut ourselves inside it. Behind the velvet curtain was the gemstone we would be shown. After we introduced ourselves, we were told the basics behind its discovery and rarity, leading up to the cabinet containing it being unlocked. But as the curtain rose, something else did. A dense and dark smoke filled my vision, and before I could realize that I should have held my breath, I fell to the floor. Atsuki, what? My heart went wild, but I couldn't move any part of my body. My mind flashed to the last time smoke had put me to sleep, and remembering what the outcome had been, I desperately tried to resist the urge to close my eyes. Good point. After just 2 weeks, smoke putting you to sleep twice in 2 weeks. It's insane. That time I didn't wake up in the hospital. I was in the same room as before, immobile. I stared at the floor, my awareness gradually returning. Yes, I think so. I was relieved to see that both of us were okay. Akuto and the other man were safe too, but we quickly saw that Naomi was gone. It was the beginning of a very long day. There had been an attack in the tower, and plenty of questions came with it. The first one was the origin of the smoke that had knocked us out. There took place the first real conversation I'd had with Atsuki in days. We were forced to discuss what we'd been caught up in. And that was what we'd most needed. We hadn't talked about anything because we didn't have the strength to say what we wanted. The situation we ended up in forced us to talk to each other, again. When I noticed that we were speaking normally, I was grateful that coming to the tower had given us what we'd been looking for. However, the future that should have been waiting for us was challenged by the same thing that had made it attainable. The events had unfolded in Ashiya Tower. In the hallway, we met Edina, Isla, Katai and Sai. There, we learned that we would spend 12 hours in the building due to an alarm that had been recently installed. It should have gone off whenever the Sekimeiya was stolen, but when we looked in the cabinet, that was immediately thrown into question. In the security room, we contacted the outside, which clarified the outline of what had happened. After that, we were assaulted by question after question. The computer turned off out of the blue, leaving us unable to look at the recorded footage. Man, we're motoring through it this time. This is the same events, but at a high pace, man. Then we looked for Naomi. He should have been somewhere in the building. We separated into 2 groups and looked through the upper floors. There, we learned about the predictions Isla's friend had made. I'd forgotten about that. And that Naomi had come from the floors below, demanding to talk to Katai privately. Oh, okay. That was when Atsuki and I noticed the first signs of the underlying factor of our imprisonment. The elevator was brought up, but we couldn't find who boarded it. This is like the first run all over again. The reason was time travel. The Sekimeiya, which we had come to see, possessed the power to send people through time. As ridiculous as it sounded, we had no choice but to accept it. Was it true that everything happened for a reason? Had we been given the ability to undo the past after wishing for it? If so, there were 2 different, bright futures on the horizon. We could leave the tower after moving past Mia's death, or we could go to the past and save her. Just when it seemed the wound was beginning to heal, we were captivated by a slim hope. It looked like the world might have been mocking us instead. We drew the conclusion that changing the past was likely not doable. Next to our 2 possible futures, there was something darker. It first appeared when we saw Naomi's body on the floor, devoid of life and soaked in blood. Trapped with us was a killer, a person who produced the same pain we'd felt before. There had to be justice for Naomi, but we were unable to figure out the truth behind her death. Something became clear very early on. When we could leave the building, everything would be much different from when we entered it. Was one of the people who discovered Naomi's corpse responsible for her death? I despised that thought, but more than that, I despised whoever that person was. We heard a sound that indicated someone else was around us, but we couldn't find anyone. It seemed that during the time we looked for the culprit, the elevator had moved in a strange way. Whatever the culprit was doing kept happening right under our noses. And soon, we came across the bathrooms on the lowest floor. Inside the men's was Naomi's body. Not the one we'd already found, but a different one, that confirmed that what we'd already imagined in the tower with us, while the world couldn't see it. Something beyond the bounds of possibility was taking place. We managed to enter the attic, thanks to one of the keys Naomi had. Up there, the footprints on the carpet informed us that such impossibilities extended to every place in the building. And lastly, inside Isla's purse, we found a greater harbinger of hopelessness than anything before it. Man, we are really motoring through this. And it really is the exact same as the first run. Would we spend more than a month in that building? As impossible as it sounded, that word didn't mean much anymore. Attempting to solve the smaller questions, Atsuki and I walked all the way down from the attic. There, I travelled through time for the first time, but it wasn't me who touched the Sekimeiya. We began to learn more and more about how time travel functioned, but the biggest barrier stood resolutely in place. The past wasn't changing. Sometime later, we travelled again. We appeared in the attic, but we had to stay put in one of the bedrooms. We were very tired, so we both lay in the beds. Despite how disheartening it was, we were able to calmly talk about the Sekimeiya. I no longer believed that we had much hope of understanding it, or using it to our advantage, but we could at least try. And even the faintest belief was thrown back in our faces. When we woke up, we found out that the Sekimeiya had taken Isla's life. That reality was truly as ruthless as we feared. What had happened to her was shrouded in mystery, but the Sekimeiya had been the catalyst. At my side, I saw Edina's devastation and wondered if my own even came close. After a long wait in the lobby, I found a hidden mechanism in the storeroom. Past a movable wall, there was a door without a handle that appeared to lead outside. But after what some of us had heard from the recorder, it wasn't possible to think that freedom was so close. Was it truly a single door away? Edina suggested locking ourselves up in a room. That was the best and safest way to reach the time limit. We chose one of the bedrooms in the attic and decided to stay there for the remaining hours. However, we didn't even last 2 hours before a wave of questions forced the lock open. I did my best to keep my mood positive, but every time I looked around me, I hated seeing where I was. I spent days avoiding the sun, and it had become what I wanted to see most. On top of that, due to how little I'd slept, my head was constantly cloudy, and my body felt physically drained. We had already accepted that the Sekimeiya wouldn't bring anything beneficial. It wouldn't let us change the past, and touching it would make us stay locked in the tower for longer. So I told Atsuki that we shouldn't do it again. The most important thing was making it out safely. But all over the lowest floor was proof that the torment had continued, and when we opened the door to the security room, we saw that Katai, who had been heavily suspected, had been killed as well. In the opposite hallway was Edina's body collapsed on the floor, crushed from the sight. We walked to the centre of the floor, wishing to be isolated so that we wouldn't become the next targets. What made us leave was who Atsuki saw. According to him, he'd seen another version of me in the hallway. It didn't make sense. Who had he seen and why? I didn't want to prolong our stay, but it seemed I had. When we took the elevator all the way down from the attic, we were intercepted. On the 3rd floor, a sudden knife threatened to cut our lives short. Were we about to die, too? There was no way we'd let that happen, so we ran as fast as we could. But Sai came in to murder us with a knife again. Through an exhausting chase, we heard the voice of our attacker. It was Sai, one of the people who'd been with us since this morning. What had we done to be chased with a knife? His voice conveyed that attempting to ask that would be fatal. However, when the 3 of us ended up in the event room, his deadly gaze ceased. The moment he left the knife on the floor, our heart rates began to finally slow down. He revealed that he had to do something that required the use of the Sekimeiya in the cabinet. After we failed to find him in any of the rooms where he could have been, he managed to obtain the Sekimeiya and threatened to use it at any time. He made no effort at hiding that there was something he wanted to do upon activating it. So, given what he had done to us, and that he had probably been behind some of the murders, we couldn't let him succeed. While he continued taunting us, the range of the Sekimeiya increased. Minutes later, when he was able to touch it, Atsuki and I ran toward him to be encompassed in his travel. Sai made contact with the Sekimeiya, but he didn't disappear. Only my surroundings did. In front of me was Sai. Both of us had appeared in the right-hand bedroom of the attic. When Sai's eyes met mine, he raised his eyebrows, hesitant to move. A knife had almost fallen from my grip, but I still had it in my right hand. I picked it up in the event room, where Sai had purposely left it behind, and it hadn't disappeared after travelling. What was it you wanted to do? Nothing. He had reiterated many times that he had to go to the past to do something, but he hadn't expected me to appear with him. I was in front of the door, while he stared at the knife in my hand. If I didn't move, I could make sure to prevent whatever he wanted to do. Then it's fine if we stay here, right? You only need to travel to the past, so that shouldn't be a problem. Are you threatening me with that knife? You know these cameras are recording, don't you? Dude, you tried to kill us with it, shut the fuck up. We must have only gone some amount of minutes to the past. We're going to spend them here until we get to the point where we were at. Atsuki's not here, so he must have appeared somewhere else. You really threatened me with a knife, how bizarre. I suppose we can stay here for a bit, since that dumbass will probably search for us. I'm confused though. I'll admit I didn't expect this to happen. What did you expect to happen? You can't really think I'll tell you anything where you have that pointed at me, right? I looked at the knife. Was I really threatening him? He had chased us with it, so while it was fair, The thought of threatening someone with their own death was sickening. I'm confused. Why did we appear here? How is it possible that I appeared with the knife in the attic when I only had it in the event room? I recall telling you and Atsuki that you were wrong about what you said. You mean that you never been to this bedroom with the knife, right? Yeah. Maybe I was right and you were wrong then. Wait, what time is it? He looked at his wristwatch and sighed. There's no current time. What? He showed me the tiny display from afar. It was blank. It stopped working? That's what Katai said happened earlier, right? Yeah. It seems it wasn't the battery's problem, but the watches. Even if it was working, it's unlikely it would display the real time though. Take a few steps back. Why? Just do it. He stepped further into the room without turning around. He could have run at me at any point, so I wanted to feel a little more secure. I walked to the drawer stand and opened the highest one while making sure Sai couldn't dash to the door. Inside was the key to the bedroom. When we'd been running from Sai, we thought that he might have grabbed it to prevent us from locking ourselves up, but it was still there. He saw me taking it out and frowned, then he began to slowly approach me. Stop. You wouldn't be thinking about locking me in here, right? That would be very mean. It wasn't my intention. By attempting to trap him from the outside, I would have given him a chance to push the door open and overpower me. That's why I wanted to lock the door from the inside, so that he couldn't simply rush to it and leave at any moment. I inserted the key into the inner keyhole and turned it. He locked both of us in. Very courageous. I dropped the key in my purse and zipped it. If Sai had been thinking about forcing his way out, that would make him less likely to attempt it. I continued standing in front of the door, a little calmer than before. For a while, Sai looked pensive and maybe even uncertain, trying to decipher his thoughts. It rarely proved useful. Are you going to tell me why you wanted to go to the past? Nope. Then are you fine staying here? I suppose. This is all a little annoying. What are you thinking about? You seem pretty lost in thought. You want me to be honest? I'm thinking about whether I should kill you. That sent a chill through my body. He really had tried to kill Atsuki, and he was willing to kill me. What we wanted was to leave the building safely, and by keeping Sai locked away, I intended to prevent more things from happening. I began to worry about my decision. Why do you look scared? You're the one with the knife. I suppose that was a little misleading. I'm not trying to kill you. As I said, I'm debating whether I should. You remember what I said, right? You will die, that's a guarantee. Because I pretty much know it for a fact. I'm wondering whether I should make it happen myself. Since I have confirmation of your death, it's very likely that if I try to push you into a wall, I'll kill you. I have no reason to think I'll end up safe though. The knife you have is pretty scary and I wouldn't want to be recorded. You're still saying that I'm going to die. Why? Because I've seen it. Are you really unaware that the blood in the lobby is yours? It's not. That wasn't my blood. Then we go back to what I already said. I know what I'm saying for certain, but the details behind it are very confusing. I do feel bad for you. You were in a coma for a while, right? If I remember correctly, the name that was put out was yours. It was unfortunate that you'll die here after surviving that. I raised the knife to protect myself. The likelihood that he was telling the truth kept growing as he talked. Did that really mean I was close to dying? Could it just be him who would do it? Or was he making it up to scare me? I'd seen Atsuki's face when he'd been told about that supposed fate of mine. The way he'd looked, and nothing more, was enough motivation to fight for my life. I'm trying to sympathize with you, but it's not easy when you're pointing that knife at me. Where'd you even find this? Haven't I told you already? If you want to keep asking questions, don't repeat them. His prediction that I would die had allowed him to assert control again, which might have been intentional. I tried to erase the worry from my face. When I didn't say anything else, he went back to thinking. With a few steps of separation, we both stood, silently on alert. Should have just locked him in. Minutes later, nothing else had happened, but I realized one thing. We'd gone some minutes to the past. Given that we hadn't heard anything around us, it was very likely we'd arrived at a time after Atsuki and I had left the attic due to being chased. That meant that the entrance to the attic was locked, so if Atsuki hadn't appeared inside, he had no way to reach us. As it was unlikely his replicated location would have had the key. I looked inside my purse and saw that the key to the attic was still inside. Just like the knife, it had appeared with me in the bedroom, while there'd be no possible location to be replicated that met those conditions. Hey Shiroya, how much time do you think we travelled? It's not like we went an hour back, right? 20 or 30 minutes, I'd say. You've taken a few steps closer without alerting me. I don't know. Well, don't you think we passed that threshold already? Shouldn't we get going? He wants to leave. Does that mean that he can still do what he wanted? It's not possible we went much further back, is it? Not gonna say anything? I thought a bit more. I shouldn't believe anything that he says because he's trying to sound just because he sounds convincing. He sounded convincing before at times, but I knew for a fact he was lying. He knows more about how the Sekimeiya works, but he's refusing to say anything, so he has a reason to keep that to himself. He definitely has something in mind, and maybe if he reveals it, whatever he's planning won't work. But I can make sure that it won't work as long as we stay here. The problem is Atsuki. If he could enter the attic, I could tell him what's happening without unlocking the door. If he didn't travel, around now is when he should start to search for us. I couldn't decide. It was very possible that the reason behind most of what had happened throughout the day had been Sai. There wasn't a lot of time left until 9 o'clock, and if I could seclude him during the last stretch, we might have been able to leave safely. Naomi, Isla, Katai, and Edina have died. The people behind that must have been either Sai or Akira. And the recorder, which has contents that are practically impossible, could have been arranged with Sai, Akira, and Isla. Not only that, but Sai had a knife, and he'd already proved to be a deadly threat to Atsuki and probably me. If we just stay here, we won't be able to harm him or use the Sekimeiya again. Of course, the recording itself must have been fabricated using the Sekimeiya, so Sai, who knows the most about it, is the perfect person to be behind it. Why would he create that? Why would Isla have hid it? If he's been lying recently, why would he say that I'll die or that the blood in the lobby is mine? That's impossible. That blood can't be mine. So why would he say it? It matches with the recording because I wasn't mentioned in it. Could it be that he's consistently trying to follow up a story that he's set up? And either way, I can't die as long as we stay here and I protect myself. Does that mean if I decide to leave, Sai's claims become the truth? I can't decide, because if Sai isn't the culprit, then it's Akira. He could be anywhere. And then Atsuki would be up against him alone. Both Akira and Sai have acted suspicious in their own ways, and Sai sounded hostile toward him earlier. That could have been a lie though, since both of them escaped the bedroom together, but if Akira is the culprit, even if Sai and I leave the bedroom, it's hard to think we'll be able to do anything if he wants to harm us. So keeping Sai shut in here is the safest move. The only real problem is that I can't tell Atsuki what's happening, if he can't enter the attic. Hello? I won't move. What? Why? That's not what you said earlier. You tried to kill Atsuki and threatened me. There's no way I'll just let you go. Hey, aren't you the one currently threatening me? You did it first. Are you sure you can do this? Will you kill me if I try to unlock the door and leave? Remember that you're being recorded. You shouldn't try it. Also, I don't think the cameras are recording. I shouldn't. There's a time travel device downstairs, so I'm having trouble understanding why I shouldn't at least try to resist abandoning it. Is that what you want? The Sekimeiya for yourself? It'd be pretty stupid to deny that. I'm sure you wouldn't turn it away either. I didn't want to humour him anymore. He didn't say anything else, so the quiet returned. Is that it? Have we decided that we'll spend the rest of our time here? It should only be a bit more than 2 hours unless we went really far back, which wouldn't make sense. I spent a large amount of time standing up, so I sat on the bed. I took the strap off my purse from around my neck so that Sai would knock me down if he pulled on it, and left it at my side. He paid no mind to it and kept looking at the floor. I still felt severely conflicted and worried about Atsuki's situation. The more I thought though, the more I felt I couldn't let Sai free, and it was very likely I could successfully lock him in from the outside. Time kept moving in the silent attic. We must have been alone, as the lack of sound was overwhelming. Eventually Sai stood up without opening his mouth. That was the first noise I'd heard in minutes, and I stared at him curiously. He slowly stepped to the door with his empty hands raised. What are you doing? I saw him gripping the handle, and my heart sped up with uncertainty. However, when he tried to open the door, the lock prevented it. Oh, it's locked, right. What? By the way, you never reattached the chain, right? The chain? What are you talking about? Nothing. He shook his head and retreated his steps. I saw his nonchalant look while I was still frowning. Did you just try to leave? Absolutely not. Is this how you and Akira escaped the bedroom last time? That's what Atsuki suspected. By trying to open a locked door. By opening it and then going back in time to unlock it. Do you wait until now to try it because it was unlikely it would have worked earlier? You're incorrect. You approached the drawer stand and took the screwdriver out of it. What's that for? Don't worry, I don't want to use it as a weapon. Who reattached the handles? It was me and Atsuki after everyone had left. You didn't do it right then. From here I noticed it was a little loose, and I just turned to see if I was right. You didn't attach it properly. Huh? I looked at the handle and didn't see anything wrong with it. Holding the screwdriver, Sai stepped to the door again. I moved back a little, afraid of the sharply pointed tool. He inserted it into one of the screws and removed it. Then he unscrewed the one in the opposite corner while I stared, dumbfounded. I didn't know what he was doing, but messing with the handle wouldn't let him open the door. See? These two go on the bottom. He swapped them. What are you talking about? They're the same. He ignored me and unscrewed the last two, which dropped the handle to the floor. No they aren't, you don't understand much about screws, do you? I stood up. Move away, I don't know what you're trying to do, but stop. I'm not trying to do anything though. Do you want me to attach it properly? No, step back. He sighed and backed off. I guess I locked myself in even further. He left the screwdriver in the drawer and looked at his feet, biting his lower lip. I sat back on the bed. Soon after, out of nowhere, he sat on the other side of it. Don't sit here. Well, that's just rude, I'm tired. Stand up. Fine. Instead of standing up with a very quick motion, he extended his arm toward me. Startled, I looked down and saw he'd unzipped my purse. What? I stood up fast enough, tightly gripping my purse and the knife. Well, damn it. My heart quickly calmed down as I stared at his childish expression. What the fuck are you doing? It's just a joke. I couldn't have left anyway since you have the knife with you. You remember what you asked earlier, right? Yes. If you get close to me again, I will use the knife. Don't move again. Alright, you can't even take a simple joke. He let his body fall and lay on the bed, yawning while face down. Stand up. I don't think so. Sorry. I just wanted the bed for myself. You told me not to get close to you, so I won't. I'm tired. I said so earlier. I didn't care anymore. I approached the desk and sat on it, resting my back on my purse and protecting it against the wall. There you go, that's much better. He responded, repositioned his face on the pillow and closed his eyes. A couple of minutes later, he hadn't moved at all. I buried my face on my knees. What was happening outside the attic? A piercing pain had arisen in my chest, and there was no getting rid of it. I began to heavily regret my decision when I considered the possibility that I wouldn't see Atsuki again. But what if he'd already been attacked? I raised my eyes and saw Sai still lying down. There's no way he won't hear me if I try to leave, right? I jumped back a little when he moved. After a long yawn, he sat up and stretched his arms. He saw me staring at him but didn't react. Instead, he crouched to grab the handle from the floor, stood up and turned around. I heard a sound, but I didn't believe it. Yet the door opened, and Sai removed the key he'd inserted in the keyhole. What? I didn't run to the door because I knew I was doomed. The handle was detached, so as soon as I stood up, Sai would close the door, locking me in behind him. Frozen, all I could do was ask what had happened. You really didn't see that I took the key from your purse. You thought I only unzipped it. I have it right here. I couldn't believe it, but he had the key in his left hand. While I processed what he'd said, his smile widened. Wait, is that why you removed the handle? Of course. Otherwise it's unlikely you would have repaid the favour and locked you in. I figured it was only fair. I can't believe you didn't realise I wanted the bed to myself just to be closer to the door than you. You're not very smart, are you? It's like, what are you... Now goodbye, I have things to do. From the hallway I heard Sai locking the door. It didn't matter because even if he'd left it unlocked, I would have no way to leave. Still trying to wrap my head around what had happened, I stood up slowly and approached the door. I couldn't open it. It was exactly the same way all of us previously locked ourselves up, in that very room. Sai had left with the handle and the key, so I knew I had no way to get out. No, now Atsuki's definitely in danger. Sai, come back, just for a second. There was no response. The attic felt just as desolate as when Sai had been there. I noticed that I still had the knife in my hand. I slid it through the gap of the door, trying to push open the latch. I frantically moved my arm up and down, but it simply got stuck in the middle. Sai! I knew he wouldn't come back. Trying to calm my nerves, I sat on the bed. He must have used the elevator since he shouldn't have been able to leave through the main door. That means the attic is still locked. Not even he should be able to enter again once he leaves. Or maybe that's not right. When Atsuki and I locked ourselves in the attic, Sai was able to come in anyway. Is there nothing I can do? I can't take this door down. I tried to go over the ways to leave, but I couldn't think of anything. All at once, the overwhelming stress came back. My hand began to hurt, so I stopped pounding on the door. There was no way for me to reach anyone or for anyone to reach me. Inside a locked building on a locked floor, I was trapped in that locked room. I realised I hadn't gone to a higher level of the bedroom. I climbed up the ladder, but I couldn't find anything. The only traces of life were the messy sheets from the time we'd been waiting there. Would I have to spend 2 hours here? I could only feel the piercing pain strengthening, threatening to eventually leave me breathless. I have the only key to the attic Katai mentioned. There's no way the police won't have another one, right? At least I have the knife, so Sai won't be able to use it. And he said he didn't want to harm Atsuki anymore. Why did we have to come here? We should have just stayed home. I hated it, but I couldn't avoid thinking about the worst possibilities. The thought of losing my 2 friends in as many weeks was unbearable. Every time I managed to calm my thoughts, they returned more and more terrifying. It was impossible for me to fall asleep, and the pain in my chest increased if I tried to lie down. I spent the time thinking miserably in front of the door, the persistent fear that I might have let the killer run free, with Atsuki unprotected, eating away at me. Even after what I'd already experienced, the way I felt then was far beyond anything I'd ever known. If I could describe Mia's death as an earthquake, I was experiencing one order of magnitude higher. It hadn't been easy to accept her death, and I, of course, still hadn't moved past it, but it was incomparable. Knowing for a fact that a friend had died was far less of a strain than fearing that a friend could be about to die. Both were horrific, but only one of them involved fear, and Atsuki being in danger potentially due to my own failure only made it worse. I imagined that if any kind of hell existed, the way I felt while alone in that room must have come close. That key? I looked back abruptly. The moment a voice reached my ears, more than 10 minutes had passed when I perceived the sound coming from directly behind the door. Hey, are you there? Was that Sai? Nobody else could have entered the attic. Open the door, who are you? There was no response. I didn't imagine it, right? I hadn't. There was another sound. The other bedroom opened. I just heard you. Please open the door. Once again, there was no response. Is Sai ignoring me? Either that or someone travelled to the attic. You're still here, right? What are you planning? I breathed hoarsely before letting out more exhausted yells. I know you're here, at least answer. You just walked away. Please, at least say something. Rather than exert myself any further, I simply focused my hearing. It made no difference. What are you doing? Please come back. Nothing. What is he doing? Hey! All I could hear were my desperate breaths. Did he only now leave the attic then? I defeatedly fell onto the bed. Soon my vision began to fade. I drained some of the scarce energy I had. Thankfully, the inside of my head had gone numb, so I could finally stop thinking. The lancing pain in my chest intensified, but I was able to withstand it. Minutes were passing by, but it didn't feel like it. I didn't close my eyes or try to relax. The only thing I could feel was despair. And with that, it's time to wrap this episode up because we're out of time for today, but kicking off chapter 3 by running through chapter 1, but this time from Shiroya's perspective. Maybe that means in the next chapter we'll be running through the same events as chapter 2, but through Atsuki's perspective. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Anyway, we've this chapter has gone through really fast. Like, we've burnt through most of the events from chapter 1 in half an hour, which is insane considering the first one took us near 20 hours to get through the first chapter. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.